And Trump plays on this. This is how he benefits. His aggrieved, way of approaching everything. And this will just add to that. And I guarantee you, after this decision, you'll see his poll numbers go up. This guy gets every break in the world. This is helping him in the near term. Now, all this stuff hurts him and hurts the country in the long term. And I've been saying that all the way through the campaign. All the criminal charges against him have helped him in the near term. But it's going to hurt him in the long term because he's going to jail. And I'm telling you, as a former U.S. attorney who ran the 5th largest office in this country for 7 years, when your former chief of staff signs an immunity agreement, that means 2 things. One, he committed crimes and is admitting he committed crimes, because you don't need immunity if you haven't committed crimes. And secondly, he's going to testify that Donald Trump directed him to commit crimes and committed crimes himself. Because there's no way that a prosecutor's office in a high-profile case like this gives immunity to someone as high-ranking as Mark Meadows unless he had evidence that no one else could give them, and that was corroborated. And I suspect it's corroborated by text messages and emails that Mark Meadows was sending at the time, and that only Mark Meadows had possession of. Voters in New Hampshire have to think about that. This isn't about some, I don't like the other side, so I'm going to vote for the person they hate the most test. And that's the way, I have to tell you, I have been astonished by some of the people I've run into in New Hampshire who just don't want to hear it. They just, you start to tell them, they literally, I had one woman one time just cover her ears when I started to talk to her. Because they know it's the truth, but they just don't want to deal with it. Our campaign is about telling the truth. Our campaign slogan is because the truth matters, and it does. But that's just a theory. It's a theory. Some might even say it's a principle. But that theory or principle is going to either be supported or knocked down by what you do here. I don't expect Iowa to do anything differently. It's a closed system. It's a caucus. Only the most loyal Republicans show up for a few hours one night to caucus. And so he's going to win Iowa. Be ready. He will win Iowa. It's here that's going to either make the difference or not. I am telling you, whoever wins this primary is going to be the Republican nominee for president. And so that momentum that comes out of here will carry into South Carolina and Michigan and into Super Tuesday. And that's your responsibility. And so, for me, I have no second thoughts about what I'm doing. Because I know him better than anybody in this race knows him. I've known him for 22 years. And if I'm out here saying this stuff, you can take it to the bank. And that's why you see him attack me as much as he does. Because he knows I know. And he doesn't like the fact that somebody who knows him that well and that long is out here telling the truth about him. But that's what's going on here. And that's what the stakes are. Because everything else that we want to talk about, and then I'm happy to take questions this morning from you on anything, but everything we want to talk about, China or Russia, the Middle East, Ukraine, inflation, interest rates, energy policy, why would you believe him on anything? He came up here 8 years ago and he lied to you and said he was going to build a wall across the entire border and Mexico was going to pay for it. And now he came up here a month ago and said to all of you, in this state, why would anyone have believed that Mexico would actually pay for the wall? Well, maybe because you said it 4,000 times in the last race. People actually took you at your word and believed you. He said he was going to balance the budget in 4 years. On the stage, here in New Hampshire, I was there. And he added $7.8 trillion to the national debt. The most debt any president has added to our country's balance sheet in 4 years in the history of this country. Yet he's back up here now saying he's the guy who will fight against the rhinos on spending. I mean, it's breathtaking. His lies are breathtaking. And you know, he used to have Roy Cohn represent him And Roy Cohn, one of his sayings was, if you're going to lie, make it a big one. Because every lie is the same, so if you're going to lie and try to convince people, make it a big one. Well, he's put his whole political career with that theory as its guide. And yet we still have, according to any of the polls that you look at up here, 40 to 50% of the people who are going to vote in the primary saying they're going to support him still today, 4 weeks away from the primary. So I love it when I come into a room like this, and so many of you encouraged me to continue to tell the truth, and that you admire what Mary Pat and I are doing here, and how we're the only ones in this race, and we are the only ones in this race. Don't believe the stories you read. We are the only ones in this race who are standing up to Donald Trump. It is not standing up to Donald Trump to say he was the right president at the right time, and for some reason, chaos and drama follow him wherever we go, as if he's an innocent victim. That's like the arsonist saying to you, for some reason, burning buildings follow me wherever I go. He is the arsonist. He is a political arsonist. He stood up here this weekend and said that immigrants from South America, Asia, and Africa, just those three continents, poison the blood of our country. He didn't say immigrants from Europe poison the blood of this country, did he? He didn't say immigrants from Canada poison the blood of this country. Understand what he's saying. It is a racial and ethnic dog whistle to say that if you're angry in this country, blame it on someone of color. That's what he's saying. And believe me, he's done this before. So, is that what you want? Representing, forget our party. Is that what you want representing our country? We don't have a king or a queen. The president is our head of state. The president is the face of our country. Really? That's who we're going to have? As the face of our country? This 78-year-old guy with hair weaves and dyed hair, does his own makeup, looks like a clown, but worse, talks like a clown, and embarrasses us. But somehow I hear from some Republicans up here, well, you know, he got screwed in the last election, so we owe it to him to send him back. I said this in Portsmouth last night. First time I went to visit him in the White House. I want to tell you, when I asked him, so what's it like to be president? This is what he said to me. He said, Chris, you won't believe it. It's the most luxurious place I've ever lived in my life. And I've lived in some really luxurious places. Do you know that every morning I have someone to shine my shoes? I have someone to steam my suit and to help me get dressed? Can you believe that? Now listen, everybody. He's a billionaire, supposedly. So you would think he could actually pay to hire someone to do that in Trump Tower or Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster. But what he said tells you two things about him. First, he'd rather spend your money than his own. And we have evidence of that going to the way he pays his legal fees, not from his own money, but from the donors who donate to him, trying to make him president. Paid $40 million last quarter from donations to pay his own legal fees. And now he's bragging about the guy who shines his shoes and steams his suits. But also, think about, for any of us, if you had become president of the United States, and someone at that time you had known for 15, 16 years, came in to see you for the first time in the Oval Office, and you ask what it's like to be president, and that's what he says. Not, oh, it's an incredible honor to represent the people of this country. Oh, it's an extraordinary responsibility to have to deal with all these incredible issues. Wow, I'm surrounded by so many good people who help me every day to advance the cause of the American people. No. What he brought up to me in a unwitting, I'm confident, honest moment because it's about him. What this does for him. And if you send him back, it will be that times 100. Because now he's pissed. And he has said, I want this to be a vengeance tour. I am your retribution. It's not going to be your retribution for anything. It's going to be his retribution for himself. He wants that job back just to prove he can get it back. And he wants that power so he can punish the people who didn't kiss his rear end and support him in some of the most outrageous things that he did. All this is true. And no matter where I go across the state, people nod their heads and say yes. And then tell pollsters they're voting for Donald Trump. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And so I am happy to be complimented and flattered about how brave I am for saying the things that are true. But it doesn't mean anything if you vote for him. It doesn't mean it if you vote for him because you think he's going to win and you want to be with the winner. It doesn't mean anything if you're willing to excuse all of this conduct and say, well, I don't like Joe Biden. Let me tell you, the only person Joe Biden can beat in the current field is him. He couldn't beat me, he couldn't beat Nikki, and he couldn't beat Ron. I'm confident of that. And I'm not a Ron or a Nikki supporter, as you might imagine. But either one of them would win a general election against Joe Biden. So if your motivation is, I just can't stand Biden, I hate his policies, he's too old, he can't function in the job anymore, all of which I happen to agree with, we're going to be like the Democrats were in 2016. They nominated the only person Trump could beat. They nominated Hillary Clinton. The only person Trump could have possibly beaten in that race. After all of his shenanigans, after Access Hollywood and all the rest of it. I mean, I'll tell you, I was there on election night. You know how confident Trump was he was going to lose? They didn't have a victory speech. 11:30 on election night, his speechwriter walked up to me and said, Governor, I need your help. I said, why? He said, I have an exquisitely crafted concession speech. And now we might actually win. Are we going to do the same thing that the Democrats did 8 years ago? Nominate the only person who Joe Biden could possibly beat? Because remember, Joe Biden's run for president 3 times before and never beat anybody outside the state of Delaware. His record is pretty unblemished, except for the one time he won against Donald Trump. So, you know, I'm happy to talk about whatever issues you want to talk about, but with 4 weeks to go, this is the issue. If we don't resolve this issue, then you are placing all those other issues, Israel, Ukraine, inflation, education, immigration, all in the hands of Donald Trump. And you will get worse results than you got the first time around. Because at least the first time around, he was surrounded by a group of people who were competent and loved the country. And you saw how he treated all those people as they left him. 40 of his 44 cabinet-level officials have not only said they wouldn't work for him again, they said they wouldn't vote for him. 40 of 44 who were closest to him wouldn't work for him and wouldn't vote for him. What does that tell you? What clown car is this going to look like if he becomes president again? You're going to have lunatics like Kash Patel and Michael Flynn and Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, all back in the White House. But this time, with no adult supervision from people like Mike Pompeo or Rex Tillerson, or General Mattis or General Kelly, or Mark Esper, or Bill Barr. All the adults will be out of the building, and there'll be no one there to say no to him. And he'll never have to face the voters again. So he will do whatever he wants to do without any worry of ramification from us. If that's not the most important issue in this race, what is? Because all the rest of it is minor league, guys. It just is. And so I'm in this race, and I got into this race because no one else was saying this stuff. And as we stand here today, 4 weeks away from the first in the nation primary, no one else is. Look, I like Nikki. I defended her on the debate stage a few weeks ago when I thought Vivek was being unfair and ugly to her. But, you know, slogans like no drama, no chaos, no whining. Okay, what's it mean? Tell me what it means. I don't know what it means. It's just supposed to make you feel good. Beware. Beware. Vote for someone who you know what they're going to do and you know who they are. Because then you won't have to wonder when a decision comes across that desk that none of us could have anticipated what that person will do. You will not wonder what I will do. And so I feel very strongly, as you can tell, about what we need to be doing as a country. And I'm here this morning because it's folks like you who are going to make the decision, not me. So I thank you for coming this morning. As you can tell, I'm fired up. I am ready to do what needs to be done here. But I have to tell you, I can only do so much. You got to do the rest. So, questions? Yes, sir.
Chris, one thing I, in talking to my friends, most worried about is immigration, illegal crossings of the border. And honestly, most of the people crossing the border are from those three continents that you mentioned. What is your take on immigration?
My take on immigration is we should do, first of all, that we shouldn't go for the TV tough guy baloney that you're getting told about immigration from Donald Trump. He's gonna finish the wall this time. Of course, he built 52 miles of the wall last time. So at that pace, he only needs another 110 years as president to get it done. Ron DeSantis said he's going to shoot them stone cold dead as they come over the border. Well, let me ask you a question. Is that the kind of country you want to live in? That people who are trying to come over the border illegally, we should just put soldiers at the border and just shoot them as they come over and kill them. It's not going to happen.
But what is your answer?
Well, I'll get to that. Okay? Because, see, my answer is longer than one line. And you should be demanding more than one line for people. So first day I'd sign an executive order that sends the National Guard to the border to supplement our Customs and Border Patrol officers who are overwhelmed because they're encountering 200,000 illegal encounters a month. And they are overwhelmed just by the numbers. So we need to send down equal numbers down there. And that's what we'll use the National Guard for, too. I'd hire 10,000 new Customs and Border Patrol officers. That'll take a year to do by the time we recruit them, train them, and deploy them. So you keep the National Guard down there for a year until you can substitute in the Customs and Border Patrol officers. Third, we only have 38,000 detention beds at the border with 200,000 people a month trying to get over. Even I can do that math. Not good. I double the number of beds to 80,000 beds so that you could detain many more of those people who are trying to come over illegally. Fourth, when they come over the border, most of them claim political asylum because they know that entitles them to a hearing. You know how long it's taken to get a hearing now? 4 years. So what do? We can't detain people for 4 years. That's not legal. So we release them into the country, and we say, in 4 years, come back to El Paso for your hearing where we might kick you out of the country. There are very few of those people who are that stupid to actually come back to El Paso. So I would triple the number of immigration judges. And by tripling the number of immigration judges, we can take that waiting period down from 4 years to below a year. And we can detain them for below a year legally. And so they stay there in detention, in the new beds, and they wait until their hearing comes up. Within that year, if they qualify for asylum, they come in. If they don't, they get sent home. And fifth, we need to change the immigration system. You know, the fact is that we haven't changed that immigration system in 40 years. Reagan was the last one who did it back in the early 1980s. And so we have 6 million open jobs in this country right now, in this economy. So this fiction that people are pouring over the border and taking jobs that Americans would otherwise have is baloney. We have 6 million open jobs. We have a labor crisis. I was with a farmer yesterday here who farms in Loudoun and said he cannot find anybody who's willing to do a hard day's work on his farm. So it's not just farming jobs. There's a whole variety of jobs that are not being done. So I would go to a merit-based immigration system. We identify the areas where those open jobs are in terms of the specialties. You have that skill, you go to the front of the line. And you come in here legally. That's the way my great-grandfather got into this country. In 1901, he's a stonemason, and he came from Sicily. And they needed stonemasons because they were building New York City. So he came over on the boat because he had those skills. And my grandfather was born on that boat on the way over. Because my great-grandmother was no dummy. He said, you wait here, have the baby, and then come meet me in America. So he said, sure, pal. I'm not letting you go to America by yourself. I'm coming with you. And she gave birth on the boat. And my grandfather told me the proudest day of his life was the day he could never remember. Because he was 4 days old when they got to Ellis Island. And he was made an American citizen when he arrived. We have to renew that because our economy needs it. And we set up the right parameters. And we have E-Verify so that employers must use it. So that you're not hiring people here illegally, only the people who come in here the right way. But to do that, we're going to have to give the Democrats something. Because they don't want merit-based immigration and they don't want E-Verify. And you got to get 60 votes to get anything. So I don't know whether it's going to be on Dreamers or whether it's going to be on Path to Citizenship for some of the people already here, but you're going to have to give them something. Because for 20 years, both sides have dug their heels in and said, my way or the highway. And that's why we have the problem and the crisis we have at the border now. Because people have given you simple answers that don't understand the complexity of the problem and made you believe emotionally they're going to fix it. Well, he didn't fix it the last time. And if he had, we wouldn't have the problem we have now. And Biden doesn't want to fix it. Because he believes that most of those people who come in will eventually become voters and become Democratic voters. So he doesn't want to stop it. So we need to have someone who actually has put some thought into it and actually knows how to execute on things as the head of government. And that's what I do in immigration. And it would be the very first thing I would do when I became president. Because if we don't have a secure border, our national security is at risk. In the last 3 months, 200 people who were on the terror watch list tried to enter from there. Now, our Customs and Border Patrol officers were good enough that they stopped all those 200. But which ones did we miss? We don't know. And so it's really an important issue. But it deserves to have a better answer than shoot them stone cold dead if they're wearing a backpack. I mean, seriously. You know, DeSantis got to be kidding me with that answer. And Trump trying to sell you the old, we'll build the wall again. But this time we'll pay for it. I mean, come on. You know, this is silliness. I have no opposition to a wall. But let's just be honest about it. It's going to take a long time to build, and we're going to have to pay for it. Because Mexico is not going to pay for a wall on our side. I remember when Trump first started saying this stuff, I had a meeting with President Peña Nieto of Mexico. And I said to him, what do you think of the wall? And he said to me, look, Governor, I don't care what you build on your side of the border, but I guarantee you one thing, I ain't paying for it. And, you know, if you were the president of Mexico, why would you? Why would you? And the idea that we're going to send our army in to invade Mexico, they are our single largest trading partner in the world. And we're going to go invade them. It's not going to happen.
Governor,
Thank you.
I agree with everything you're saying about Donald Trump. But if it looks like you can't win here in New Hampshire, would you back Nikki Haley so that Trump doesn't win in New Hampshire?
Well, look, I get asked this question all the time. You know,
Sure.
let me just say this to you. If she showed me that she was actually running against Donald Trump, I might. Show me how she's running against Donald Trump. How about this? Ron DeSantis and I have both said we would not accept vice president for Donald Trump if it was offered. Nikki won't answer the question.
Nevertheless.
I don't know what that means, though. Like, look, I know nevertheless, but that's a pretty big nevertheless, isn't it? Because let's say I get out of the race.
The choice is Donald Trump.
No, but hold on. Let's play this out because it's not that easy. First of all, whatever you put my support at the moment, 10%, 12%, 15%, whatever you say it is. Do you think that like automatically every person who's going to vote for me says, "Oh, well, okay, Christie's out. I'm going to vote for Nikki Haley"? The polling doesn't show that. The polling shows that maybe she gets 3 out of 4 at best. Do you know that the polling says 15% of the people who are voting for me say Trump is their second choice? Make sense of that for me. Make sense of that for me. I've been kicking this guy in the teeth for 7 months. And they say, "Oh, we like him, we're voting for him." And then they say, "Well, what happens if Christie's out?" "Well, then I vote for Trump." I'm like, okay, so this math that people engage in is not that linear. It just isn't. So part of what, if my goal here is, and it is, to make sure that Donald Trump is not president first and foremost, after the fact that I'd like to be president, okay? So, but if my goal is to stop Trump, what happens if I get out and I support Nikki, and then she looks like a bit of a threat to Trump, and Trump goes, "Okay, I'll get rid of the threat, I'll make her vice president. She's young, she's 51, she can wait to be president." And then she signs up with Trump. Then what is this conversation going to be? "Oh, Chris, you dope. You got taken." I mean, it's not that simple. She could make it simpler. If she would do what me and Ron did, to say, "I will not take it if offered." I've said it. Ron has said it. Vivek, my God, Vivek would give his left arm to be Trump's vice president. So you know what he'd do. We don't know what she'd do. So I understand the nature of your question. I'm not a dummy. I get it. But I also, you kind of are asking me to buy a pig in a poke. And you're trying to, like, if she's really against Trump, show me. Show me. Don't hedge. If you show me, well, then maybe I have something to think about. But if you don't show me, I've got nothing to think about. Because I'm not doing this in order to then get in league with someone who would get in league with Trump. That doesn't make any sense. Yes, sir.
Governor, thanks for coming and great comments. I'm tempted to ask you about the current issue of the Atlantic magazine, but I'm going to skip that and instead ask you about the national debt because it scares the bejesus out of me. One of the things that nobody is really talking about is that if we don't deal with this national debt, it's going to destroy this country.
Of course it is.
What's your plan?
Well, I've talked about it, and I've talked about it in the debate. First off, I would immediately return federal spending to pre-COVID levels. So what that would do to this year's deficit, for instance, it's running at about $1.7 trillion. It would take $1 trillion off of our spending,
all right,
just to go back to pre-COVID levels. All right, so that gets us a little more than halfway there. Gets us to $700 billion deficit. Then, once I became president, I would go to zero-based budgeting. That's what I did in New Jersey. What is zero-based budgeting? Exactly as it sounds. Departments come in, and the way normal budgeting works is they say, let's say, we spent $200 billion in our department last year, so how much more are you going to give us? Instead, what zero-based budgeting is you spent $200 billion last year, you're spending nothing. Justify every program here to me. I did that in New Jersey. That's where I became familiar with this concept because desperation causes you to get inquisitive. I had an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget that I took over from my predecessor. So more than a third of my budget was in deficit. And I had a constitutional requirement to balance the budget in 5 months. I got in January, I had to have it balanced by June. So I went in and did that. 3 days a week, 6 hours a day for 6 weeks. Went through every line of the budget. And I eliminated 832 programs in my first year. And we balanced the budget without raising taxes. But what also happened when I did that was my popularity went from 55% to 38%. Because every one of those programs has a constituency, or it wouldn't be there. But you got to be unafraid to do that. That's the same thing I do on the federal level. Is go through and say, these are the cuts. And remember something, I got that budget approved by a Democratic legislature. That took some work, real work, to get votes from Democrats to vote for a budget that eliminates 832 programs. But they understood the nature of the crisis. I made the public understand the nature of the crisis. And that's what a president needs to do now.
Yeah.
Remember, 33 trillion in debt. And 14 trillion of the 33, so nearly half, has been accumulated in the last 7 years by Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Trump 7.8 trillion, and now Biden over 6 trillion. This is obscene, and it's done by guys who know they're at the end of the road. They're not going to have to live through that. They're not going to have to live through the ramifications of that. They just get to say yes to everybody. Be as popular as that makes you, they go out the door, and soon, because it happens to everybody, they'll be dead. And our grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to be paying this debt. And remember this, too.
Hopefully.
A third of the debt needs to be refinanced next year. A third of it. We borrowed that money when interest rates were at 0 and 1%. You're now talking about interest rates almost 5 times that we'll have to refinance to that. It will take our debt service payments to well over $1 trillion a year. So before we spend a nickel on the national defense, on public health, on anything that the federal government does, air traffic controllers, food inspectors, like just think about all the things that happen. Before we spend a nickel on any of that, we have to spend $1 trillion just to pay our notes on the debt. So it is a crisis, you're absolutely right. And you need a president who's willing to be unpopular. And having been a Republican president in a Democratic state, I was used to that on a regular basis.
Thank you for that answer. That is a terrific one.
That's what we have to do. And, you know, I did it there. And by the way, the end of that story, of course, is it did drop to 38%. And 3 years later, when I was up for re-election, I got re-elected in a blue state with 61% of the vote. Because people looked at me, and I remember one woman in the diner saying to me, you know, I don't agree with most of what you did, but you did what you said you were going to do. And that's so unusual, I'm voting for you. And I think a lot of people feel that way about this. So that's a huge issue, and if we don't deal with it, it will eat us alive. Eat us alive.
Let's take one more question.
All right? Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask a personal question, since I'm
Thanks.
respectfully a fellow Jersey boy. What is it about your upbringing and personal growth in life that makes you stand out as the only truth teller who's got the guts to go up against Agent Orange? Was it about your education and upbringing that, and made you a very good speaker too, by the way?
The good speaker thing, I have absolutely no idea, because neither my father or my mother are that great. But if you ask how I can do this, it's my mom. You know, I'm the son of a Sicilian mother. That is a really interesting way to be raised. Because my mother, and she's also the daughter of a single mother, who's the oldest in her family, and essentially because my grandmother had to work 16 hours a day, my mom, from the time she was 10 years old, raised her 2 younger siblings, her younger sister and younger brother. So she's a tough woman who was made tough from the time she was 10 years old forward. And one of the things she used to say to me all the time was, Christopher, be yourself, because then tomorrow you don't have to try to remember who you pretended to be yesterday. and it has been the thing that has, you know, guided the way I act in public and in private, often to the chagrin of some of my friends and some of my family members. Because my mother, after giving me that advice for my whole life, I remember near the end of her life, we were having an argument about something, and I said something to her very direct and very blunt. And she looked at me and she said, enough already with the honesty. And I said to her, wait a second. what happened to being yourself so you don't have to remember who you pretended to be yesterday? She goes, no, don't do that with me. They do that with everybody else. And I think, you know, that's just the way I've always been. And it has ups and downs to it, right? Because, you know, it might be nice every once in a while to pull back on the throttle a little bit. But it's just not who I am. And it served me well in every job I've had. You know, when I was U.S. Attorney, those are really tough decisions about who to prosecute, who to investigate, and how to make sure justice is done. And as governor, as a conservative in a blue state, you got to learn how to work with people. And the easiest way I learned to work with people was just to be really honest with them. And I used to say to my colleague who was the Senate president as a Democrat, like, look, if you tell me the truth, I'll tell you the truth. And in this room, we can say to each other, whatever we need to say outside to get through the day, fine, but we have to be honest with each other in this room. And we were. And we got a lot of stuff done because of it. And I do think that the country needs a dose of this. We've had faux honesty from Trump. Oh, he's authentic. Yeah, he's authentically a liar. Now, I don't know. He is authentic. Like, I wouldn't argue with you that he's not authentic. What you see is who he is.
Scary.
I've known him for a long, long time. That's who he is. But he's authentically a liar. And so you got to start to wonder about whether that's the best thing for our country or not. So that's why I am the way I am. My mom's been gone for 20 years now. She never got to see me become governor. She certainly never got to see me run for president either time, at least not down here. I'm confident she's watching from up there, and I think it's a relief, actually, for me, because if she were here, she'd have a lot to say. I'd be getting critiqued on a regular basis from her in a way that only I could get critiqued by her as her oldest son. But it's a gift in the end, because I never have to get up in front of a room like this and wonder what I think. All I have to do is figure out what topic I want to discuss, but I don't have to worry about wondering what I believe. And that's what this race is all about in the end. Like, look, I understand, we've understood from the beginning that running against a guy who's essentially an incumbent, because that's what he is an uphill fight. It just is. He's got more money, he's got more notoriety. I know that. But that doesn't mean that you back down. And it doesn't mean that you take it. And it doesn't mean that you let your country go off the rails when you think you might be able to do something to make it better. So
you're still being guided by a very wise woman.
I am still being guided by her. And when I forget, Mary Pat reminds me because she got to know my mom really well, because we got married very young. I was 23 and she was 22 when we got married. We were married for 37 years, so she knew my mom, for 20 years before my mom passed away. So, when I forget, she reminds me, and it's good. So, look, you all have a lot to think about, and we have Christmas coming in a few days, and I think it's a good thing for all the candidates to leave you alone for a few days. And we're going to go home this afternoon, right from here, and we're going to leave you alone for a while. But we'll be back next week. And when we are, we're going to continue to make the same argument you heard me making this morning. And I can't guarantee you it's a winning argument, but I know it's the right one. And so if the right argument doesn't win, I'll live with that. But I will not change what needs to be said in order to try to curry a few more votes. Because in the end, then, I'll just disappoint you. And I'd be much more hurt by winning and disappointing you than I would be by losing. And so, it's good to talk to you all. Thank you all for
Thank you so much. 2 minutes, sticking out a little bit.
Yeah, we'll stick around for a couple of minutes and chat.
Very good.
And then we'll get to Boston to fly home.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Well, it's the truth. She was, I'll give you a story that I don't really tell much anymore. I used to tell it back in 2016. But she was a smoker for 55 years. Tried everything to quit. She couldn't quit. And so finally, at 71, she got lung cancer. And by the time they discovered it, it was spread through her whole body. It was in her brain, it was in her kidneys, in her liver. It was in a spot up high in her lung where they couldn't see it. I was just thank you. Thanks so much. They saw the cancer. So she got diagnosed on Valentine's Day of 2004, and obviously was attorney at the time. And fast forward to May, she was very sick. And I was at a national U.S. Attorney's Conference in San Diego, and my brother called me, and my younger brother, and he said, "Look, she's really sick. She's back in the hospital. And if you want to see her, like, you need to come home now." So I took the red eye home from San Diego and went right to the hospital in Livingston at St. Barnabas. So I went right to the hospital. I got there, and when I got there, she was sleeping. And so I sat by the side of the bed and just waited for her to wake up. And she woke up and she looked at me. And they know hello or anything. She said, "What day is it?" I said, "It's Friday." She said, "What time is it?" I said, "It's 9:30." She said, "Go to work." And I said, "Mom, I just flew overnight from San Diego to come and spend the day with you. So I'm taking the day off from work." Very good. And I'm spending the day here. And she said, "Christie, it's a work day." Christie, it's a work day. Go to work. And I said, "Wait, I'm not getting the taxpayers' money's worth. Like, I'll make the time up. Like, don't worry about it. I'm staying here." And she reached across and she grabbed my hand and she said, "Go to work. It's where you belong. There's nothing left unsaid between us." Sandy. She said, "There's nothing left unsaid between us." And it was the great, of all the gifts she gave me, it was the greatest gift she gave me, because she was giving me permission to let her go. And I said, "All right, I'm going to go to work, I'll go to work." She goes, "That's what I want." And I got up, I kissed her on the forehead, I left. She was in a coma 4 hours later, and she died that Monday. And when she died, Mary Pat said to me, "It seemed so at peace." And I said, "Because she gave me permission." And that was the way she was. She's the teacher when they were young. She was constantly about something. And I'd say to her, "Enough, Mom, I heard it." She goes, "No. You're going to hear all of it now. You're going to be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're going to hear it right now." And then here we go, fast forward to a moment when there actually could have been one. And she said it exactly right. There was nothing that we had to say with her. We had shared everything, every truth, every emotion. Yes, and her love was, her love was unconditional. And that was both good and bad. The great part was that it was unconditional, and I knew that she loved me no matter what I did. The bad side was that she felt free to say anything she wanted, and anything about it, and the music's gonna listen to it, so just Christopher, and she called me Christopher all the time. And I'll tell you that this is the other story about my mother, about my name. So I'm the firstborn, and my grandfather, my dad's dad, when he passed away, his name changed Christopher, and he had a son, James. So my parents So back in those days, my father didn't go to the hospital. He waited and got a call. The baby was born, and then he went. So my father gets the call, and he's with his brother. Now my aunt was pregnant also. She was about 3 months away from delivery. So they never discussed this again. So on the way, my uncle drove my father to the hospital. And he says, "Oh, by the way, we're going to name our son after Dad." Because no, I'm changed Christopher. I'm going to name my son. There's no shit that's going to name well, too bad, you better agree on another one, because that's my name. I'm giving it to my son. So my father goes to the hospital and says, "My mother banned me." My brother doesn't want us to use James Christopher. I think I kind of used the junior. I kind of have to defer to him. So for 3 days, I didn't have a name. because they couldn't agree on the name. And so finally the nurse comes in and says, we have to take this baby home tomorrow morning, and we cannot release the baby without a name on it, a birth certificate, and you have to come up with a name. So finally my mother said to my dad, well, what if we just reverse it and make it Christopher James? What about that? She said, Christopher James. My dad said, okay, I agree with that. They call the nurse in and they name me. Done. They bring me home the next day. They put me in the bassinet. My Sicilian grandmother was there. And she goes over to the bassinet and picks me up. And she said, look at those Irish Christians. They never thought about it. They were so stressed about naming names. So she was always like, oh, she would say to me, because people would ask her all the time, how did you name your son Christie? Like, well, she eventually got around to arguing that, but in the beginning she was like, she would tell the story about how it was a mistake, it was an accident, you know. And so finally, I then am having her first grandchild. And Mary Pat and I are in the hospital. We give birth to our oldest, who turns out to be a son. And so I call and we name the answer. I call my mother and I say, congratulations, you're a grandmother. She goes, do I have a grandson or a granddaughter? I said, you have a grandson. She goes, did you name him Chris Jr.? I said, hold on a second. For 30 years you've been telling me my name was a mistake. And now you want me to perpetuate the mistake. And there's not going to be any Chris Jr. Forget it, it's not going to happen. She's like, well, it is kind of a nice name. I'm like, forget it, Mom. I mean, Chris Jr. So that was her. Everything came out just out of learning to live with it and deal with it, but most of it was pretty smart and hard-edged, and like she made me feel good about yourself. She said, "Find what you can be anything you want to be. As long as you're willing to work hard enough."
I got a picture of this. Of course, Tom, I want you guys are
Merry Christmas.
And I got a question over here.
All right,
so you guys stand next to each other.
All right, here.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, so that's something you can ask about.
You know, part of what turns guys can be if I do, I will. If I don't, I
Norm, did you get one?
Anyway, I've got already tonight. Thank you for offering thinking about I've got too many already. Thank you.
Like what?
There was probably be a good amount
My next event is a video conference for the guy named Michael Moran. Because I think he used to be ambassador to Russia for a little bit. And I think they told about his calling the time. Oh, yeah.
because
I was thrilled about that. Did you go to the meeting last night? Yelling about what happened? You know, Eric is so glad you come. You know, the last minute. That's great. Glad you could make it.
they don't want to. You can't have a book. I just don't think it's
They don't have, and I think that, a year ago, that I think they planned for a completely different buildings, just sketchily, it was a organization, they didn't do a wetland study, they didn't do a soil study, but it asked for $170 million. Don't worry, we got it all figured out. Now they're back with a completely different idea, which is okay, but he's, once again, like, don't worry, we got it all figured out. I'm not here. It's okay to not have it figured out, we'll just be honest with each other.
right, and it's useful
They're building
because
that
when you
for
have a book, yeah, not like tonight.
$800,000 like, I mean, like, yeah, it's wonderful condos, very good.
That's like one of my favorites. Like in Central Park is fun. He loves because Central Park you take your dog off during like early morning hours and he would you still like walk around there. These days close to us. He sees like a big lawn, like a great lawn. He's like
Sure, don't worry about it. It's going to have no impact on taxpayers. You know, of course,
I've never seen a dog that can't like very like tall. I got some from his back like like this. He's kind of yeah, like we're okay cottage. He's like bark.
But it turns out he's also really into honey.
And when I saw
right now, and he's so enjoying it. And then they come back in the summer. What does he do?